Sex is a touchy subject. It's one of the few taboo subjects in our society today. And don't take my word for it. Look back at your own experiences. Do you remember when your parents first told you about sex? For those of you who actually got that talk, it was probably quite awkward. Not just for you, for your parents as well. And when I was a boy, I asked my mom about the birds and the bees. Her response? Well, the bees like to sting the birds, and the birds let them. To a 7-year-old, that made no sense. Because I was like, okay, and then I went off to play. But that conversation was never revisited again. Now, if you'll indulge me, I'd like to try a little experiment with you. Will you all please stand up? Thank you. Now, if your parents never gave you the talk about sex as you were growing up, I'd like you to sit down. Good. Now, to be clear, if your parents gave you the talk, you should remain standing, okay? Oh, and getting a book or a video or being sent to a class doesn't count. Okay, you get to sit down too. All right. Folks, take a look around. I've done a bit of research on this, and I found that most of the people that I asked this question to never received the talk. And this informal survey appears to match. Seems like a lot of us have had to figure this out on our own. So the few of you still standing, go ahead and have a seat. Thank you. In my quest to understand sexuality and the impact it has on our society, I'm always shocked when somebody tells me that they didn't get the talk or they did get the talk. And frankly, I want to know what was said. Why? Because I was challenged in having the talk with my kids too. I was horribly ignorant and incredibly nervous. Now, you remember the talk that I received as a kid, as a 7-year-old, about the birds and the bees? Although poetic, it wasn't much help. The version of the talk that I gave consisted of telling my son that tab A goes into slot B. True story. So, what was revealed on those rare occasions where I found people whose parents engaged them in this discussion is that the talk primarily consisted of two things: avoiding pregnancy and avoiding disease. And while extremely valuable points, they are inadequate to support everything we should know about this subject. Now, you might be wondering, what's the big deal, right? With an average annual population growth of 2.2 million, we've clearly figured out tab A, slot B. But the lack of sex education in our modern society has taken a toll. I surmise that rape, sexual harassment, child molestation, and all the other ways that people are violated may be a result of what's missing in the talk. I know it's a big leap, but what if we included some other topics that provide a more robust understanding of all aspects of human sexuality? I can think of at least 3. The first of these would be communication, which is a necessary component for having good sex, but we're not communicating. Perhaps it's uncomfortable telling the truth about what you desire, need, like, and don't like. But if we don't share, how will our partners ever know? We just might be sentencing ourselves to a life without pleasure. Now, in 2017, I conducted a survey where I asked 300 men and women what percentage of all the sexual experiences they have ever had were a 10. 10 being out of this world, right? Men reported an average of 30%, whereas women reported a measly 2%. My hypothesis? Maybe we men aren't doing as well as we think we are. And ladies, you're not off the hook either. In a separate survey of over 100 women, 63% reported having faked orgasms. When asked why, here are the top 3 answers on the board. Survey says, number 3, physical pain. Number 2, boredom. And the number 1 reason women gave for faking orgasm is pressure, so as not to hurt their partner's feelings. Now, this is more proof that we don't talk with each other about what works and doesn't work in the bedroom or wherever you do it. But this can be resolved through communication. So what if we could both have a 10 experience each and every time? Or at least a 7. The second topic to be included in the talk is stuff you should know, like the how-tos of sex. Now, did you know that the average human being has sex about 1,000 times per birth? Does that mean that we're having sex 999 times to produce a baby? I don't think so. Obviously, we're not always doing it to procreate. We do it for recreational reasons too, and there are restorative properties to sex, providing oxytocin, serotonin, and dopamine with every orgasm. And that's the feel-good stuff. You could also engage in transformational practices like Tantra, sexual yoga, and sacred sexuality. All great reasons that are equally as important as procreation and should be in the talk. How important do you think it is to understand your physical body and how it responds to sensual stimulation? Rather than fumbling around, actually know what to do when it comes to pleasing your partner. Let's communicate on how to enjoy sex with one another. And when it comes to sharing this information with our children, it would be especially helpful when it comes time for them to move on from being a virgin. A decision usually made by them, not us. Now, I bet some of you are squirming in your seats over this one. Because underneath it all, if we teach our kids the how-tos, we would have to admit that our kids may already be having sex, and it's not just for procreation. A truth most parents don't want to have to think about, but a truth that very much exists. In addition, I think we owe it to our young people to teach them safe sexual practices like condom use, how to have a safe sex conversation, and where to go to get tested and how often. Sure, these are adult topics, but I found that when you're open and honest with someone, especially young people, they get it. Besides, if we don't talk about sex, it creates the experience that there is something wrong, and it takes on an air of shame. When we do talk about sex, we open up the lines of communication, making it normal and easy to enjoy without shame. Working together, we can collaborate to give our culture a more positive view of sex. The third and most important topic to be included in this new talk is consent. According to Black's Law Dictionary, consent is the agreement, approval, or permission as to some act or purpose, especially given voluntarily by a competent person. And express consent is that which is clearly and unmistakably stated. What would happen if we taught people how to ask for consent? And how to accept or decline a sexual offer? What if you could negotiate the request, allowing for a mutual experience more to your liking? More importantly, knowing how to revoke consent if you change your mind. Could this be one of many solutions to the Me Too problem? As I like to say, good sex starts with consent, and consent is always revocable. I also like to say, consent, don't have sex without it. So, can you now see how including communication, the how-tos, and consent to the standard talk could make a difference? In doing so, we protect and liberate each other. It protects because it replaces ignorance with knowledge. It liberates in that it prepares people for the unknowns of sex without shame. I urge you to start talking about sex with each other and to talk with your children, even if they're grown and have children of their own. Being informed can allow us to have amazing sex, safely and consensually. Now, that's the talk your parents never gave you. Ladies and gentlemen, sex is a touchy subject, but it doesn't have to be. Thank you.